earlier. The most common number sequence in nature is this sequence: 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, 34, and so on. These numbers are now called the Virahanka numbers. You may have seen them under a different name in school. So they're called the Virahanka numbers because back in around the year 700, Virahanka wrote the following poem, which I'm translating, to a problem that he had posed about counting meters in Sanskrit poetry. So he wrote this poem. He said, write down the numbers 1 and 2, and then each subsequent number that you write down should be the sum of the previous two. Okay? So that's how this sequence is made. So, right, you write down the numbers 1 and 2, and then the next number you write down is the sum of the previous two numbers. So 3 is 1 plus 2, and then 5 is 2 plus 3, and then 8 is 3 plus 5, and then 13 is 5 plus 8, right? And then 21 is 8 plus 13, and so on. You just keep adding the previous two numbers. So this was written in a poem back in the year around 700 by Virahanka. Now, Virahanka was not a mathematician. He didn't consider himself a mathematician. He considered himself a linguist, which really illustrates the fine line between science and humanities, between mathematics and the humanities. That this very important sequence that plays a huge role in mathematics and throughout science was actually discovered for the first time in history by somebody who was a poet. So I first learned of these numbers from my linguist and Sanskritist grandfather as the Hemachandra numbers. Hemachandra wrote about these numbers extensively as well in the context of poetry. He lived around the year 1150, and so they commonly became known as the Hemachandra numbers. But now, as we're digging into the literature, we're finding older references. So Virahanka so far is the earliest reference in Indian literature where these numbers came up, and in world literature. These numbers were also written about by Gopala in the year 1135. Of course, in India, these numbers are known as the Fibonacci numbers, after the Italian mathematician who lived 500 years after Virahanka. So the question is, why did Virahanka come up with these numbers in the context of poetry?